Hello, and welcome back to this series on ethical communication with data. My name is Fred LaPolla, a librarian at NYU Health Sciences Library, presenting for the National Network's Library of Medicine's National Center for Data Services. In the previous video, we discussed ways that error and uncertainty may be unclear in our data visualizations. In this video, we'll discuss the role of simplicity in detail in our data communications. A few years ago, The Economist put out a blog post discussing recent visualizations that they had published and ways that they felt that they could have improved their visualizations. So, for example, in an article on age versus GDP or percentage of GDP government spending on pension-related benefits, so things like Social Security, but of course using different terms in different countries, they put out this image that we see on the left with different nations in a sort of dark blue and lighter highlighted nations that they wanted to call out in a lighter blue. So as to highlight, this article in particular was about Brazil. And they ultimately felt that this could have been improved by decreasing the focus on these background points that they weren't really calling out with such focus. And that would allow the user's eye to be more readily drawn to the data points that they wished for those users to see quickly. Similarly, they put out an image discussing poll responses to Brexit and how users viewed that election. And originally they put sort of individual data points at very specific times. And they felt that perhaps it would have been easier for users to read these different visualizations using a more smoothed out view with the individual data points highlighted in a lighter color. So this is not to say one of these is correct or wrong. They, of course, certainly felt that their updates would have been better, but it is worth thinking about what is gained and what is lost when we simplify our data for our reader, for ourselves, for our message. So just things to think about as we sort of dive into today's session. So it is, of course, the case that we want to provide a clear, truthful message for the people we're communicating with. So it is definitely, we're taking it kind of just as our baseline that our goal here is never to mislead, certainly not to intentionally mislead, but to be aware that when we present information, we are trying to convey something to our end user, and that communication is inherently rhetorical. So we're trying to persuade our reader that something is true, or that our point of view or the results of our data collection are true, and we want to persuade them as effectively as possible. So, philosopher of science Bruno Latour once said, "Who will win in an agonistic encounter between two authors, and between them and all others, they need to build up a statement? The answer, the one able to muster on the spot the largest number of well-aligned and faithful allies." So it would make sense, we'll come back to this in a moment, that Bruno Latour is really saying that the key thing in any discussion would be sort of the appeal to ethos or the appeal to authority or credibility of the one speaking. That's definitely could be certainly taken as a controversial claim. So other things that we might appeal to would be just the logic of the point we're making, or the logos, again, to kind of use Aristotle's terms, as well as the pathos or the emotion of the one listening. So Bruno Latour is really coming in for those who are essentially able to cite the most. So definitely within the scientific and academic realm, that may be true, where when we can effectively cite and provide a lot of background in a scholarly paper, we may feel that it is more true than something that lacks that, but it is worth thinking about that. That may be also somewhat of a controversial point. So as we saw with those economist visualizations, the first two visualizations we saw, making any chart or figure is definitely going to entail making several decisions around what to highlight, where to draw people's attention, when to smooth, and when to show detail. And so sometimes, again, we are presenting our data to others. Again, it's not to say we're always doing that. So we may choose to use different types of charts when we're just looking at data on our own to kind of get a sense of underlying trends. So things like histograms or density plots. Histograms will kind of look like bar plots, whereas density plots will look like a smooth curve. But they're both showing essentially the distribution of our data. So we might make different decisions in order to simplify or make data more understandable for us. But we also will often, when communicating with data, think about how we might do it for others. And again, this is not to imply we're trying to mislead, and I'm sort of operating under the assumption that everyone here is looking to be honest and truthful in their presentations. But it is important that when we're communicating that we are trying to convince our readers that our message is reliable and true. So that's all just to say that our design choices are rhetorical decisions, and we should really make our design choices ethically. I'm going to stop here and continue in a moment in the next video discussing the context of data visualization.